The clock on the wall in the living room read 7 o'clock in the evening, and I was sitting on the couch, watching David prepare for yet another long work journey. He was so focused, adjusting his tie and checking emails on his phone, that he barely noticed his wife in the room. The glow of his laptop illuminated his face, and I couldn't help but notice the dark circles accumulating under his eyes. With each passing day, the feeling of loneliness became more palpable, like a shadow settling between us. "Are you going to be late again?" I asked, trying to break the silence that had settled in. My voice came out weaker than I intended, almost a whisper. "I don't know, Clara. The project is important, and we have a crucial meeting today," he replied without taking his eyes off the computer. His response made my stomach twist. It was always the same thing. Work, deadlines, meetings, and me? I wondered if there was still room for me in his life. I got up and went to the kitchen, preparing a hot tea to try to warm my heart that felt frozen. As the water boiled, I looked out the window, watching the lights of Berlin flicker on in the night. It was beautiful, but the beauty of the moment felt distant, almost as if I were watching a movie, unable to connect with what was happening. "Clara, you're not listening to me?" David interrupted my thoughts, now beside me, holding the tie he had just put on. "I'm talking about the presentation, and I need your opinion." "Sorry, it's just that." "I'm only thinking about how we're drifting apart," I confessed, the truth escaping before I could think twice. "I feel like you're always busy, and I feel so alone." He sighed, and I could see the frustration in his eyes. "You know this work is temporary, right? Once this is over, we'll have more time together." "But what if it doesn't end?" I challenged, feeling a rising anger. "What if you keep going like this, always busy, always absent? What will happen to us?" David looked at me, and in that moment, I saw a glimmer of concern in his gaze. But then he reverted to his usual tone, almost defensive. "I'm doing this for us, Clara. For our life, for our future." The conversation wasn't going anywhere, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. I let the words hang in the air as he moved away to grab his coat. I wanted to scream, but I didn't know how. The loneliness that consumed me felt like a silent storm. The next day, I met my friend Lena for coffee. I needed to vent. As soon as she sat down at the table, I noticed she was full of energy, as always. "Clara, how are you?" "Actually, not very well," I replied, nervously stirring my cup. "David and we're going through a tough time. I feel like he's pulling away more and more." "You need to talk to him, Clara. You can't let this turn into a monster," Lena suggested, looking at me seriously. "Communication is key. You need to be honest about your feelings." "I know, but it's so hard. What if he doesn't understand? What if he just doesn't care?" The insecurity showed in my voice, and Lena reached out, holding my hand. "You won't know until you try. You deserve to know the truth, and he does too. Don't let this keep going." As the conversation flowed, a part of me longed to be brave enough to confront David, but another part feared what I might uncover. Doubt was becoming a heavy burden in my chest. When I returned home, my heart was divided. While tidying up the house and trying to keep my mind occupied, I couldn't shake off the worry. The idea that something might be wrong between us left me anguished. It was at that moment, while opening a drawer in David's office to tidy up, that I spotted a small piece of paper. Pulling it out, my heart raced. It was a hotel receipt. The sight of the paper paralyzed me. What did this mean? My mind began to race, and anguish took over me. What should I do? That small piece of paper could be the key to understanding what was happening between us. When I finally decided to confront David about the receipt, my heart raced. The living room was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. He was sitting at the table, eyes fixed on his laptop, but I knew this moment could no longer be ignored. I took a deep breath and approached him. "David, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the nervousness consuming me. He looked up, surprised. "Sure, Clara. What's wrong?" I placed the receipt on the table right in front of him. "What is this?" I asked, forcing myself to remain calm. He looked at the paper, and his expression changed instantly. "Oh, it's just a mistake." "A misunderstanding," he replied, his voice rising slightly as if trying to defend himself before I could accuse him. "A misunderstanding? David, this is a hotel receipt. What were you doing there?" My tone was more intense than I intended, but the feeling of betrayal was starting to consume me. He hesitated for a moment, running a hand through his hair. I went there for a work meeting. The company was evaluating a new partnership, and it was the only place we could get. "Were you alone?" I asked, the words coming out faster than I would have liked. Doubt was already planted in my mind, and I couldn't stop the questions that tormented me. "Yes, of course." "The meeting was nothing serious, Clara. You know how these things are." "I have nothing to hide," he said, but I noticed that his voice was tense and his eyes avoided mine. "I want to believe you, but this doesn't seem right. Why didn't you mention this?" Frustration bubbled up inside me, and I felt like a stranger in my own home. Because I didn't think it was important. I was just focused on work. "You know how busy everything is," he replied, trying to calm me down. "But you're always so busy, David." "Sometimes I feel like I'm talking to a wall," I exclaimed, my voice cracking. "How can I trust you if you're not honest with me?" He sighed, finally appearing a little more vulnerable. "I promise there's nothing to worry about, Clara. You are the most important person in my life. I don't want this to ruin what we have. And what if it is happening? What if you're cheating on me?" I was almost in tears. The pain I felt was palpable. "I don't know what to think. Please, don't make assumptions. Let's talk about this. I'm not with anyone." "You are everything I want," he said, and there was a sincerity in his eyes that made me hesitate. But the distrust still hung over me like a dark cloud. After that conversation, I needed to know more. I couldn't just stand still, waiting for him to justify himself. I needed to investigate, to find out what was really happening. In the following days, I decided I would start to follow David discreetly. The idea of turning into some sort of private detective felt strange, but I needed proof, something that could clarify this confusing situation. The next morning, I put on neutral clothes and went to his office. I waited until he left and, with my heart in my throat, followed him through the streets of Berlin. He seemed so normal, heading to work, stopping at a cafe he usually went to. I sat at a table in the back, observing him. He was chatting with colleagues, smiling, just as he always did. But the expectation of seeing him with someone else, of discovering the truth I feared, left me restless. The day went on, and although the environment around me was full of life, I felt increasingly alone. What was I really hoping to find? Proof of infidelity or confirmation that I was just being paranoid? By the end of the day, I hadn't found anything that could confirm my suspicions. David returned home, and I did my best to act naturally. But the seed of doubt had already been planted, and I knew the fight for the truth had only just begun. The atmosphere of the night was heavy, almost oppressive, as I watched him from a distance, hidden behind a tree on the illuminated promenade. My heart raced in my chest, and doubt consumed me like an unquenchable fire. David was ahead, laughing and chatting with an unknown woman. My stomach churned, and a wave of despair engulfed me. I couldn't believe he would be meeting with someone else. The image of the hotel receipt still burned in my memory like an indelible mark. "Clara, you need to be rational," I thought to myself, trying to calm down. But logic was lost in the confusion of emotions. The woman was younger, with long blonde hair that shimmered under the streetlights. I was paralyzed. Lena's words echoed in my mind. "Confront him, Clara. The truth always comes to light." But I couldn't move, a part of me wanting to step forward and the other, more cautious, holding me back. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, but hesitated again. My heart raced. What if I'm wrong? What if all of this is just a big paranoia? The idea of being the jealous and distrustful woman terrified me. I decided to turn back, letting the scene unfold before me like a movie I didn't want to watch. My feet felt heavy as I walked away. Each step was a struggle, a fight against the reality I feared to face. When I got home, confusion took over me. I sat on the sofa, the silence echoing like a deafening scream. "What's happening to me?" I murmured, frustrated. I looked around, trying to find solace in familiar things, but everything felt distant. I picked up my phone and began scrolling through messages, but none of them gave me the clarity I was seeking. The anguish turned into a constant buzz in my mind, a storm of doubts and insecurities. Am I being paranoid? He's always been so dedicated to work. The memory of David's smile, the way he looked at me, filled me with deep sadness. But the image of the woman by his side wouldn't leave my head. Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he let me be a part of his life? The room was cold, and I felt even more alone, as if the walls were closing in around me. The next day, I went to the cafe where I usually met Lena. The morning light poured in through the window, but I couldn't feel any lighter. "Clara, you look like a zombie," Lena commented upon seeing me. I laughed without humor, sitting down at the table. "You won't believe what I saw last night." She leaned in, her eyes filled with curiosity. "What happened?" I saw David out with a woman. I don't know what to think. He was so close to her. My voice faltered, and a tear slipped out. Lena frowned, her expression quickly shifting from curiosity to concern. "Clara, are you sure? He might be doing something work-related." "But the hotel receipt, Lena. He was hiding that from me." Indignation took over me, and the confusion surrounding me started to dissipate, giving way to a rage I didn't know I had. Lena placed her hand over mine. "Listen, you need to focus on yourself right now. What do you want? What do you need? Don't lose yourself in this whirlwind of emotions." "I just want to know the truth," I replied, my voice firm, but fear still hung in the air. "But what if the truth is that he's cheating on me?" She shook her head. "Don't let this consume you. Focus on yourself. Love yourself first, Clara. Then you can decide what to do about him." Her words resonated within me, and for the first time, I realized that perhaps I was placing all the responsibility for my well-being in David's hands. "You're right," I murmured, but uncertainty still accompanied me. Life wouldn't stop, and I needed to find a way to move forward, regardless of what was happening. I woke up that morning feeling a lightness I hadn't felt in a long time. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, and for a brief moment, I set aside the worries that haunted me. I decided it was time to do something for myself, something that would make me feel alive again. With sudden determination, I sought out a new hobby. I remembered how much I had always loved painting, but I had let that passion slip away, suffocated by routine and the emotional distance that had settled between David and me. The first painting class was a liberating experience. The studio was filled with people of all ages, some as nervous as I was, others already immersed in their projects. The instructor, a woman with gray hair and a warm smile, began talking about the importance of expressing oneself through art. "Painting is a reflection of who we are. Don't be afraid to let your emotions show," she said, demonstrating how to mix colors. I sat down at one of the tables, equipped with brushes and tubes of paint. Looking at the blank canvas in front of me, I felt a wave of emotions. I started to brush the paint, mixing shades of blue and green, and with each stroke, the tension inside me seemed to dissipate. With each class, I got to know new people, like Sophia, an outgoing woman who loved to share stories about her own struggles and triumphs. "Clara, you have to come to the art exhibition next week. It's going to be amazing. You have to show your work," Sophia suggested, excited. The idea of exposing something I had created made me feel nervous, but at the same time excited. I began to see a new purpose in my life, a space where I could be myself, away from the doubts that surrounded me at home. On the night of the exhibition, the studio was vibrant. The smell of fresh paint and the sound of animated conversations created a contagious atmosphere. As soon as I entered, my eyes scanned the walls filled with the students' works. Some left me perplexed, others emotional. When I found my painting, an abstract representation of loneliness and the search for love, a wave of pride washed over me. It was then that I saw him. Felix, my first love, was there, standing in front of my canvas. My heart raced at the sight of him again. He had changed, but the charm and boyish smile were still present. Our eyes met, and he approached me. "Clara? Is that you?" His voice was soft and familiar, like an old melody. "Felix, it's been so long," I replied, trying to hide my surprise and emotion. We talked about our lives, memories from the past, and the choice to pursue our dreams. The attraction between us was palpable, as if time had not passed at all. "You always had an incredible talent." "This painting is very deep," he praised, looking at the canvas. "Thank you. I'm just rediscovering art, trying to deal with some things in life," I confessed, unsure if I should share more about my situation with David. "If you need someone to talk to or just to vent, I'm here," Felix said, his sincere and warm gaze making me feel at ease. The night went on, and I lost myself in conversations and laughter with Felix. Every word he spoke seemed to bring back a bit of joy I had been missing. When we finally said goodbye, I felt a mix of happiness and confusion. What did it all mean? I was feeling alive again, but what about David? In the following days, I couldn't stop thinking about Felix. His presence had stirred feelings I thought were long dormant. When David came home that day, I noticed he could tell something was different about me. There was a light in my eyes. "You look different, Clara." "Happier," David commented as he sat down at the dinner table. "Yeah, I'm trying to find myself again," I replied, avoiding looking into his eyes. The tension between us was still there, and I knew he felt it too. I feel like we're drifting apart." "What's happening?" David asked, his voice filled with concern. "I don't know, David. I just need space to think," I said, trying to be honest but also feeling guilty. The words felt heavy. He fell silent, and the quiet settled between us. What should I say? The truth? Or should I hide what was beginning to bloom in my heart? The connection we once had was fading, and the possibility of a future with Felix left me confused. The sun was already setting when I decided to meet Felix again. With each encounter, the nostalgia for the past mixed with a sense of renewal I hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if, beside him, a part of me that had been dormant awakened. We walked through the streets of Berlin, and the city felt more alive than ever. "You've really changed, Clara," Felix remarked, looking at me with a smile that seemed to light up the space. "There's a light in you that I didn't see last time." "Yeah, maybe I'm just rediscovering myself," I replied, feeling a mix of happiness and guilt. The thought of David didn't leave me, but the pain he caused was beginning to dissipate, even if only temporarily. We talked about art, about our lives, and with every word, he seemed to draw me closer. The way he gestured, the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke. Everything made me feel alive again. "You know, I've always admired your courage," Felix said, with a serious look. "You deserve to be happy. Don't let yourself be held back by something that's not worth it." Those words resonated within me, as if they were a call. While I was there, surrounded by the beauty of the city and his presence, I realized I was allowing myself to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. But the memory of the hotel receipt I had found, and the suspicions that consumed me, were still very present. When I returned home that night, my heart was divided. I wanted to feel free, but I couldn't ignore David and his promises. Yet the happiness Felix brought me was undeniable. The next morning, reality hit me like a bucket of cold water. David was home, and the atmosphere was tense. He seemed restless, and I knew something was bothering him. "Clara, can we talk?" he asked, trying to maintain a calm tone. "Sure, what's up?" I said, trying to mask my anxiety. He took a deep breath, as if bracing himself. "I heard about you and Felix." The frankness in his words caught me off guard. "What are you doing?" "What am I doing?" I asked, feeling my heart race. "And what about you? What were you doing at the hotel?" David fell silent for a moment, and the tension between us grew. "This isn't about me, Clara. Isn't it?" I retorted, anger rising. "I found a receipt, David. You can't just ignore that." He looked at me, his eyes reflecting confusion and defensiveness. "I was at a work meeting, Clara. You know my professional life is complicated." "Complicated?" I laughed, but there was no humor in my voice. "Complicated is what you're putting me through." The argument heated up, and the words became sharp knives, cutting between us. I laid bare my suspicions about his infidelity, and he, in turn, grew furious, accusing me of being obsessed with a story that didn't exist. "You don't trust me," he shouted, his voice heavy with frustration. "That's what hurts me. And how can I trust you?" I replied, pain seeping into my voice. "I was there, David. I saw you enter that restaurant with another woman." The atmosphere was heavy and silence fell, broken only by the sound of a ringing phone. My fingers trembled as I looked at my cell phone. An unknown number. "Wait, I need to answer this," I said, feeling a wave of anxiety. "Clara, no," David exclaimed, but it was too late. I answered, "Clara." The voice on the other end was low and hesitant. "You need to know that David has a much bigger secret than you imagine." My heart stopped. The words echoed in my mind, and for a moment, everything around me faded. I looked at David, who was pale, and realized that the game was just beginning. I glanced at the computer. The pages open about David's company seemed to dance before my eyes. The documents I had collected over the past few days spoke of dark activities, of businesses that left me uneasy. What did I really know about my husband? The image of the man I loved began to disintegrate, like an ancient painting being corroded by time. I decided I needed to find out more. The truth was the only thing that could give me peace. That night, while David worked in his office, I sat on the couch, my heart racing. The silence of the house was deafening. I looked at the clock, time was passing, and I needed to act. I went to his office, where the drawers were locked tight. An impulse led me to open one, and to my surprise, I found a folder full of documents. The first thing that caught my attention was a name, Klaus Richter, one of the partners in the company, involved in financial fraud. The father of a childhood friend had mentioned this name in a casual conversation about business scandals. My stomach churned. It was like I was unearthing a truth that should never have been revealed. "Clara," David's voice interrupted my thoughts. He appeared in the doorway of the office with a look of surprise and concern. "What are you doing here?" I was just organizing some things," I lied, quickly closing the drawer. He watched me with a gaze that seemed to penetrate my soul. "You know you can't mess with my things, right?" His voice had a reprimanding tone, but his features were tense, as if he was hiding something. "I'm sorry, I choked. "I'm just worried about you, David." "The company? What's going on?" He hesitated, and for a moment, silence settled between us. "It's nothing you should be concerned about, Clara. I'm dealing with some internal issues, but everything will work out." "You're being threatened, aren't you?" I asked, urgency echoing in my voice. "How do you know that?" He stepped closer, gripping my arm, a mix of desperation and anger on his face. "You need to stop investigating. It's not safe." "Not safe? Or you don't want me to know the truth?" My voice grew firmer as adrenaline coursed through my body. "David, I found documents linking you to Klaus. What are you hiding from me?" He took a deep breath, his eyes drifting away. "Clara, I'm not a criminal. I was forced to get involved with them. They threatened me, but I didn't do anything illegal." The desperation in his voice was palpable, but there was something more. The way he spoke seemed like a desperate defense. "If you're not guilty, why didn't you tell me before? What were you doing at the hotel?" Anger and confusion swirled inside me. He hesitated once more, and then, as if a barrier had broken, he confessed. "I was meeting with an informant. He can help me clear my name. The hotel receipt was for that, Clara. I didn't want to involve you in this, but now you're here, and I don't know how to explain." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The revelation mixed with relief and fear. "So, you weren't cheating on me?" I asked, the truth starting to form in my mind. "No, I would never do that. I just wanted to protect you," he replied, his eyes locked on mine, pleading. The weight of the situation began to lift. I realized that, despite all the lies and misunderstandings, there was love between us, a love that, even wounded, could still be saved. "We need to face this together, David. We can't let them destroy us." He nodded, and I saw determination shine in his eyes. The life we had built together was threatened, but now, armed with the truth, we were stronger. "Let's figure out who's behind this and clear your name, side by side," I declared, feeling a wave of renewal between us. The shadows of distrust began to dissipate, and for the first time in a long while, I felt we were back on the same page. The journey would be difficult, but together, we could face any storm.